I think about why educational inequality continues to be our reality in the United States, I cannot help but come to the conclusion that there is a key problem underlying resistance to reform. There are many problems, but I'm just going to pull this one that I think is core. And that is an insidious tendency to prioritize me and mine. This attitude, mostly amongst citizens of privilege, such as the doctor in Lake Forest that Melissa Powers mentioned when she was here in a panel, prevents justice from prevailing. It is arguably what drives us in our individualistic culture. And of course, tribalism is a normal part of the human condition. We see that all over the world. To be focused on what is good for me and my children and those like me impacts so many realities in our culture. But I'm going to focus on schools and education. We have core beliefs about wanting the best for us and ours. And at worst, we keep out the others out of fear that they will negatively impact the educational opportunities for our own children. This is at the heart of what Michael Emerson referred to as breaking the cycle of privilege, something that he identified when he was here as crucial to any attempts to address the injustice of our educational system. What then is the theological response to this me and mine attitude? First of all, we should not be surprised when this attitude comes from the unredeemed. Reverend Dr. Alex Gee was right when he said that we can make laws, but we can't change attitudes. But what grieves me, and I think what grieves all of us when we think about this, is when we see the me and my attitudes in the people of God. As with so many aspects of the Christian life, if we do not adjust our theology to our practice in order to align with God's truth and what he says about himself, we will continue to operate from an unhealthy place, often assimilating cultural norms around us. So just what does God say about himself and about what he wants for us as his people? And how should our theology impact the way we respond to these natural me and mine tendencies that we all have? First, we need to situate this me and mine problem as part of the fall, of course. That shattering of shalom that took place in the Garden of Eden and permeates each human being and all of creation. It does not take us long when we read the scriptures to realize that God recognizes this me and mine as core to our sinful natures. Cain kills Abel because he does not want to be his brother's keeper. Jacob steals his brother's birthright for himself. Lot takes the better land for himself and his. I could go on, but I think you get the point. And when God gives us the Ten Commandments, gives the Ten Commandments to Moses, to his people, and then to us, he prioritizes our relationship with him, of course. But we could also argue that more than half the commandments address the me and mine problem. And when Jesus compresses them into the two greatest commandments, the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. What does that mean as it applies to the problem of educational inequality? How do we love ourselves when it comes to education? And how do we love our neighbors in the same way? So let's first acknowledge that there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting the best educational opportunities for our own children and the ones we know and do life with. In the interest of full disclosure, I will say that I grew up with parents that were pretty fixated on me and mine. And I grew up in white privilege, and because they could afford to do so, they sent me to wonderful private schools, and I got this amazing education. I'm very grateful for that and the opportunities that it gave me. But as I have grown in my faith and my understanding of who God is, I've come to realize that I want that same opportunity for all children, not just me and mine. So if we're truly going to love our neighbors as ourselves, we need to want those same opportunities for all children. I could go on about unpacking how God defines neighbor. Don't have time to do that. You all know Good Samaritan is a good place to start. But it's not defined, of course, neighbor as in neighbor close by in my culture, right? So the first theological response is this is a part of Shalom Shattered. This is a part of Shalom Not Yet. This is a part of the reality that we live in our systems and among ourselves, okay? Understanding that. Beyond this general overriding mandate to love our neighbor as ourselves, there's another theological principle that pushes against the me and mine attitude. As you know, Scripture's replete with statements about the condition of the oppressed. And in my opinion, no one is more oppressed than precious children who, through no fault of their own, were born into a neighborhood with inferior schools. When Melissa Powers was here as a part, by the way, she's a graduate of our education program in the college. Very proud of her, right? When she asked us not to forget about her little kindergartners in Waukegan, that was her final word in the panel. Those of you that were here may remember that. When she asks us, that's what she's asking us. She's asking us to push against our me and mine and to embrace her kids, all kids. Brandon Ewing on the same panel, school board member. Okay? He said, as one of the points that he was making, we need to care about the success of all children. This is that pushing against me and mine. We have a mandate from God to work for educational opportunities that are equal for these children. Michael Emerson said that the system only works if we all play the game. As Christians, as the church, we must stop playing the game. Why? What does Scripture tell us about the poor and the oppressed that should give us a holy imagination of his heart and how we as his people can and must adjust our focus? Now, as an aside, I am fully aware that when I'm going to talk about these principles, I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak, and not just the gospel choir over there, but preaching to the choir. Okay? Because I know this is what you eat and breathe and think about and care about. I get that. Right? I'm so grateful for you. But even the choir needs reminders sometimes, so I'm just going to go there, right? And I'm going to highlight passages that you're already familiar with, maybe in different contexts. So when we study Scripture, we find that God cares deeply for the oppressed, the hungry, those who are bowed down, strangers, and the fatherless and the widow. And while there are numerous passages I could draw from, I'm going to use Psalm 10, 12 to 18, pull out phrases. Here we are reminded that God sees the trouble of the afflicted. Now think about children in under-resourced schools, okay? That he considers their grief and takes it in hand. We're reminded that the victims commit themselves to God, and he is the helper of the fatherless. The Lord is king forever and ever. Do we need that reminder when we're dealing with these issues? The Lord is king forever and ever, and he hears the desires of the afflicted. He encourages them, and he listens to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed. Let us never forget that this is the heart of God. He loves these children. He does this work. He holds them. He sees them. He has not forgotten them. These children made in his image, created to be creative, capable of learning anything, deserving of opportunities. But God does not stop there. Well, of course, we can make the connection that if he cares about the children who aren't getting a high-quality education, so should we. And we can make the leaps toward action from there. But God, helpfully, explicitly, how many are grateful when it's very clear what Scripture says? How many? Okay. Gives us, as his people, a clear mandate. He tells us that we must do something. We must move beyond our natural me and mine attitude to seek justice for those who do not have the same opportunities. In Isaiah 1, 12 to 18, God tells us how weary he is when people bring meaningless offerings, that their incense is detestable to him, that he's not listening when they celebrate the festivals. He commands them to wash and make themselves clean. He tells them to take their evil deeds out of his sight. He tells them to stop doing wrong. He tells them to learn to do right, to seek justice, to defend the oppressed, to take up the cause of the fatherless. He tells us exactly what he wants from us. In Micah 6:8, he wants us to do justice, he wants us to love mercy, and he wants us to walk humbly with him. You cannot walk humbly if you are operating for me and mine. He tells us in Jeremiah 22:15 and 16 that if we want to know him, we must defend the cause of the poor and needy. Do we want to know him? In Isaiah 59:14 to 16, God sees that there was no justice and was appalled that there was no one to intervene. In Zechariah 7:8 to 12, he tells us that he's angry when we do not obey his command to administer true justice, show mercy, and compassion. And in Luke 11:42, he reiterates his anger, this time with the Pharisees, when they give a tenth of all they have, but they neglect justice and the love of God. Friends, I believe that God feels the same way. When we act like those Israelites and those Pharisees today, when we lean into the me and mine attitude that permeates our American society, when we as Christians conflate American values with Christian values, oh yes, I went there. When we attend our churches on Sundays and give our tithes and offerings and ignore the needs of the oppressed around us, or even worse, fight to keep them oppressed, all in the name of me and mine. If it is true, as every expert agrees, that education can be a great equalizer, that if children from any background are given excellent educational opportunities, it can make all the difference for them. If that's true, then as Christ followers, we must fight against educational inequality. This is the heart of God, and it should be our hearts too. And that brings me to my third point. So 1, love your neighbor as yourself. 2, fight for the oppressed. And 3, we need to surrender the me and mine attitude that keeps us from unifying as Christians for this important work. You know this, but it's me and mine that keeps us segregated in our churches. It's me and mine that duplicates efforts to address educational problems instead of working together. It's me and mine that perpetuates the impression that Christianity divides rather than unites. If we want to follow the example of the leadership team of Reverend Dr. Alex Gee's church that's made up of, as he said, mostly Black Baptists and white Lutherans, I love that. It made me laugh out loud. If we want to unite as churches to adopt schools, as Brandon Ewing suggested, if we want to enter into relationships in order to share the love of Christ, as Luke McFadden said, and by the way, he's my pastor. I love him. Okay? If we want to do anything to address educational injustice, we must surrender to the perfect love of God that casts out our fears. And it is his love that compels us. It is his love that unites the people of the Spirit and the people of the Word. Can we do that? I could preach for a while on that one. It is this love that unites the people with book smarts and the people with street smarts. It is this love that unites the people who pray and the people who act across denominations and across cultural and socioeconomic divides. Folks, I wish that I had time to share with you the history of American public education. I teach an entire course on that. No time. But let me sum up. That was a Princess Bride reference for those of you. Okay. Let me just say that it began with limited opportunities for a few wealthy males. And every major reform since then has come from a core belief among, as it started, a few people, that every American child has the right to have a good education. That's the history that can be traced. about American public schools. And not so coincidentally, many of the leaders of change have been believers. Not all, but many. I believe it's time for another revolutionary change. I'm old enough to have watched awareness of the public around this grow over the last 15 years. And that's how it starts, when people know there's a problem. And then people stand up to do something about it. May we as God's people be at the forefront of this. May the church regain the prophetic edge that it has lost, according to Dr. Gee. May we find new and creative ways to push past me and mind, to enter into uncomfortable spaces and partner with people we formerly considered other for the good of all children. Mark Laberton, in his wonderful little book, The Dangerous Act of Worship, if you've never read that, please read that. He explains, among many other wonderful points, but then when we truly worship God with abandon, with a willingness to be uncomfortable, we find that worship and justice are of one piece. I cannot think of anything more appropriate than for us to draw upon the rich tradition of a gospel choir to help us worship a just God who by his grace helps us jettison our me and mine attitude, gives us a holy vision of his heart for justice, and provides us